Make some noise for Chris Sarandon and Craig. Thank you so much for joining us. These folks are crazy about you, about the movie. Here we are.
Is that screaming on cue?
Here we are, 20 years after the fact. And probably this is 20? Yeah. And then I'm assuming a couple years because of just production.
The movie took, what, 2 years, 2.5 years? At least. Yeah, I know it was just a year recording stuff.
Right.
After that, all that.
Right. Are you as amazed as I am that it has, as you said, it has grown in popularity? It is more popular today than when it initially released.
Absolutely. I mean, it did well enough when it came out, but it was nothing near what it is now. And it continues to escalate, I think, from what I'm told by everybody.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think what's happened is that a lot of people watched it. A lot of you were kids when you first watched it, right? And a lot of you are old enough now that you're watching it with your kids. That's the way it happens.
The Disney component.
Yeah, it grows exponentially.
Yeah.
You know.
We'll start at the beginning. I
was born.
The audition. I mean, did they call you? Did they seek you out?
Well, it's always strange. I tell people that I got it through my lawyer, which is Mark Sindroff, who's a lawyer in New York City, and he also represents Denny Elfman. And I guess they hadn't found what they were looking for. That's what I surmise, right? And they said they needed somebody who could do a combination of like Cab Calloway and Fats Waller. And I said, he said, I didn't say anything. He said, I think I have a person for you, make a long story short. And that's kind of how I got there.
And I was called to go to an audition. I didn't know anything about it. I just knew that the movie was being, that it was Tim Burton's idea. I knew Tim wasn't directing it, that Henry Selick was directing it. And I went in and I read lines for Jack. And I think like a few days later, I got a call. They want you in San Francisco in a couple of days.
That was it. To start recording?
Yeah.
Already?
Wow. Yeah.
And so
They had, when I was hired, they had already recorded all of Danny's songs, and they had animated them. So I had, when I went there, I had the visual of what they were doing with the character plus Danny's voice. And I think they were trying to find a voice that was close to Danny's, essentially.
That makes sense.
It was kind of, I was just thinking when you were saying that actually they were doing the song when they first got in touch with me. And that's what they said to Cab Calloway. Whoa! You know, all those things, he does the slides and things. And if I remember correctly, when I got there, they started doing a couple of lines that were leading into the song. I don't think their intention was to hire me to do the actual speaking part. And then they asked me, well, what would your tape be? They showed me a few sketches and things because they hadn't done anything yet on Oogie. And I said, well, somewhere between Bert Lahr and the voice of the demon in The Exorcist. And they kind of went, okay. And I just did a few lines and that was it. I didn't know, I probably was auditioning and I didn't know it, but, you know.
And so then you got involved sort of in the middle of production. They were already...
I guess it sort of maybe the first third. Yeah, after the first third. Because they'd already done and animated all of Danny's songs.
Crazy.
But they still had all the dialogue sections to go.
Now we talked about it real quick. Tell us about the very first time that you two met in person.
Well, it was a very snowy evening. No,
storming that.
I was doing a show in New York at Lincoln Center called Happiness with the wife of Chris, a wonderful actress, Joanna Gleason. And we were talking one day, and of course she knew that Chris and I had worked on the film together, but she didn't know we had never worked together. And she asked me if I'd ever met Chris, and I said, no, I hadn't. And she did what she said, no, what? You know? And she said that Chris was coming like the next day or something to lunch. And that's when we met. And this was like 2008, something like that.
Years. Maybe a decade later.
Even though we were arch enemies on the screen, we had never met. And we have since become good friends.
Yeah. Isn't that sweet and wonderful? We live in a home, a very lovely house now.
Because a lot of folks might not know this. I'm sure that some of you do. A lot of these recording sessions you do by yourself. You kind of go into the room, get locked in your little padded booth, and you go to town. You had one experience where you worked with somebody else.
I had one recording session with Catherine O'Hara, and that was it. The rest of the time I was I was on my own with, it was me and Henry Selick in the studio. Just recording scene by scene by scene. And essentially, if you guys are not familiar with it, the process was that they would call us and say, okay, we need you in San Francisco in a week or 2 weeks, are you available? Yes, okay. You fly up, you go to the studio. I never forget the first time I went to the studio in San Francisco, and the walls of the entire upstairs were lined with storyboards of the entire movie.
Exactly.
And then I remember very vividly, downstairs, there was a sort of recreation area with lots of punching bags. Because the process is so extraordinarily exacting and time-consuming that these guys, the animators, had to take a lot of time off. Just, please, give me a...
Hello, Officer Steve.
Right, yeah. Because as you guys are probably familiar in the stop-action animation, it literally is a millimeter at a time. A frame shot, they move a little bit, another frame is shot, they put another head on Jack for a slightly different expression, the frame is shot, and they shot, I believe they told me that they shot a cumulative 11 seconds of usable scene a week.
And that's why it took 2 years. Go ahead.
No, I was just thinking about how amazing that is, and also how it would either be very crazy making, i.e. the punch bags, or very zen.
Yeah.
I thought if you could get your head there, that it would be something that you just sort of go into some other space. And I don't know anyone ever said that that's how it felt, but my thought about it.
Subsequently, you both have been able to reprise your role in various different means, either video games. I think both of you have done the Kingdom Hearts. And did you do the Infinity?
I don't remember. They just call me, they stick a copy in front of me, and I go, oh, okay.
I was
Jack now, again.
I was leading from something that we talked about from the
I've done ringtones.
Oh, it's Jack?
Yeah. If any of you have Jack on your phones, ringtones, that's me.
Here's a question. Would you, for a prize, would you record your voice on someone's answering machine?
Well, what price was that?
Well, you're the going.
You're talking Trump? What are you talking?
We'll start at 20.
I have been told by Disney, don't do anything. Don't use your voice as Jack, except as Jack with us. Otherwise, watch it.
Is this insane? Right slips at you. So, and I know personally that Ken, you just recently did some voice work for the Villains Unleashed event that's held right down the street at Disney's Hollywood Studios. Tell us a little bit about that most recent session that you did. That was just a couple months ago, I think.
Yeah, it was a couple months ago. Well, luckily, because of the technology that exists, I live in St. Louis now most of the time. And the first time something came through to do, they thought I was in California, and I said, well, I'm not in California. But they were able to patch into a studio, make a long story short there. And they're on the phone, and I'm in the studio in St. Louis, and we record that way. And it's as if they were there, and they go, good morning, Ken, hi, we're in Burbank. And I go, good morning, everybody. And then we record. So this last session was like that, and they said what they were doing, and I re-recorded a little bit of the song, not the whole song, but a little bit of it, which I had already done, oddly enough. I said, why are you doing this again? We already did it. They said, well, we may want to do something different, probably. I said, whatever, give me the paper. You know, it's simple. I mean, we just did it. I mean, it wasn't any different than any of the other sessions, in answer to the question. It was just some more lines and some more specific things as to what they were doing at the park. And of course, the director was on the phone as well, and he knew what the action in the play would be. So that was the idea, to meet what they were going to do.
And I don't remember recall this, but I spoke with Rob, who was one of the writers, and Tony, who's the director for it. He said that you had a couple suggestions of alternate, like Oogie Boogie wouldn't say it like that.
Yes.
Kind of stuff. Do you recall?
Well, absolutely I do, because I think as it's gone down the line, people have their own ideas about who these characters are. And not that I may know better than they do, but I know in the realm of what his mentality is, if you will, things that they've written that they like to hear him say that aren't necessarily in his, what they call it, wheelhouse of what he really would say. So there were only a couple of 2 or 3 lines. I said, well, can we change the lines so that it's actually in his vernacular, so that it's in his vocabulary, because they had written out of his vernacular and vocabulary. I'm just saying. So,
did they give you writing credit?
Pardon?
Did they give you writing credit?
Yes. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we all get a piece of every little piece of the conversation we did. Not.
And so you've done fireworks shows, and one thing that we talked about, and I was kind of leading that when you were here for Child's Play a couple years ago, there was something that you had to check with your agent about, that I'm pretty sure I know what it was, because you couldn't talk about it then, because it was super top secret. I think it was the Disney Infinity project. It's little figures. And so you had done a bunch of recording for an interactive thing.
Yes, that's right. Yes, and that's what you're talking about.
Yes.
Yes. I remember now. Yes, all you have to do is remind me. My wife and I call it Sumheimers. Not all of them, but just some of them.
So, other than reprising your roles right now, what is keeping you busy? I know that you're at if you want to see Ken, he's not artist in residence, but you often do productions in St. Louis at the Muni, correct?
I do. I started my career there when I was 18, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. And I've been lucky enough to go back there now for the past 20 years. I think I missed one summer. And do lots of roles in lots of musicals that you've all heard of or seen. Fortunately for me, a lot of them I get to do a sort of what they call non-traditional casting, like Mr. Bumble and Oliver and Colonel Pickering and My Fair Lady, things that I wouldn't necessarily be cast in as an African American. But being how it's my home, they have allowed me to do that there, which has been really terrific.
So it's a hometown discount?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I've been doing that there. Is that the question?
Yeah.
And by the way, if you guys don't know, the St. Louis, the Muni is like considered one of the great summer theaters, right?
It is. It's called the granddaddy of all outdoor theaters. It seats 11,000 people. And I'm always happy to say that 1,000 of the seats are free seats because it's a municipal theater. So they've been there since it started in 1908 or something like that.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
When you were 18.
It's a great theater. When I was 17, thank you very much. But it is a great place, and practically everybody in the business at some point or other has worked there or will, and it's a great place to work. If you're ever in St. Louis in the summer, come to the Muni. Bring an ice pack, but come to the factory.
And Chris, what's keeping you busy?
I have I'm starting work on a new musical in New York the following week by a guy by the name of Dave Malloy, who did a Broadway show last year called Peter, Natasha, and the Great Comet of 1812. And that show was based on a chapter of War and Peace, and it was a musical that was kind of like a pop opera. This show is about Rachmaninoff, the great Russian pianist and composer, who, when he was very young, went to see Tolstoy, Leo Tolstoy, and he was taken by his mentor, Tchaikovsky. This was a heavy-duty company here. And Tchaikovsky takes Rachmaninoff to see Tolstoy, Rachmaninoff thinking that Tolstoy is going to say, I'm one of your greatest admirers, I can't believe that you're so young and yet so talented. And Rachmaninoff walked in to say hello to him, and Tolstoy basically said, your music stinks. What are you doing? You know, you're going to ruin your complete life by composing music the way you compose it. And Rachmaninoff, from that moment, for the next 3 years, had writer's block. And he went to see a hypnotherapist. And the hypnotherapist basically worked him through it and out of it to where he became this great, one of the great, you know, modern composers of of any of our lifetimes. And the play is about this process that Rachmaninoff goes through, but it sort of takes place in his head. And I play Tchaikovsky, Chekhov, Tolstoy, and the Tsar of Russia.
Just some minor characters.
Yeah. And it's a 2-week workshop, and then we're going to do it again in May at the Lincoln Center Theater.
Wow, I really want to see that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And then I'm also directing a play that you guys hopefully will see at some point in your lives, called Not Someone Like Me, and it's about it's a series of 5 monologues in which 5 women talk about, these are real stories, real women, talk about their experiences having been assaulted sexually. And the play is very shocking, very moving, and we're doing it, we've already started doing it in colleges. We're doing it at a place called the New York Theater Workshop in March for 4 successive Monday nights with celebrity casts, and we're doing them to benefit great crisis groups, and I'm directing that. And I got a couple of movies coming out, little cameos in movies. So,
let's get to the question and answers. Yeah, let's hear from that. Come on down, line up. No one's gonna hug your teddy bear. He said no hugs. Say your name and ask your question.
Hi, I'm David. Ken, you were great in Cats back in the day.
Thank you, thank you. Well, since you brought that up, let me just do a little advertisement. November 21st, we filmed Cats some years ago, like 1998 or something, 98. And it's been out on DVD forever, but at any rate, they're re-airing it on PBS Broadway. What's it called? Masterpiece.
Great performances.
Great performances, great performances, thank you. Great Performances, November 21st. They're re-airing it as part of Great Performances. So if you haven't seen it by any chance, tune in November 21st. Check your local listing for Cats.
Reprising the role that you did Broadway, you originated the Broadway.
Old Deuteronomy. Yeah. Old, as they said, an old dude on top of it. That's nobody heard that.
Okay, my question is this, something I'm always wondering about. The movie is marketed as Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas. I know Henry Selick directed it. I believe that Tim Burton did the basic character designs and the basic artwork, but after that...
The story, basic storyline.
Yeah, but after that, how much involvement did he have compared to Henry Selick, who I think, did the work?
Well, as far as the recording of the actual roles were concerned in the animation process itself, I think Henry was in charge of all that.
Yeah.
I'm sure that Tim had some sort of an overseer role. I'm sure he looked at dailies.
Right.
You know, it's his baby. And then in my case, when the movie was cut together and into a rough cut, then I went back in the studio with Tim for like 2 days, and we did some additional work. But basically, it was working with Henry.
Yeah. And I never worked with Tim at all, unfortunately. People ask me, what was it like to work with Tim Burton? I don't know, what was it like to work with Tim Burton? I never did, but I'm sure he was very conscious of everything that was happening all the time.
I'm sure it was.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Timmy. I have a question for actually both of you. Do you collect your own like action figures of yourselves?
Yes, there are a lot of Chris Sarandon action figures out there. And any of you who have some of the really old ones, I'll buy them back.
We're actually just talking about there was a watch that came out, and I think you were right. It was you were right because you are the guy. That came out as a McDonald's.
Burger King.
Is it Burger King?
I don't know.
A plastic watch that you could get for like $1 with your meal that's now going on eBay for hundreds of dollars.
Yeah.
And you have, well, here they are!
You gotta watch it, you gotta watch it! Well, I think they even were free almost with some of the meals. If you got like a big Happy Meal or something, you gotta watch free. And I just collected them. I had like 6 or 7 of them. I was saying to Chris, I gave my nephews one each, which I'm sure are somewhere in a dump pile somewhere in Cleveland by now. But so I just had them. So it's nice to know. I didn't know they were worth that much, right?
And also the producers, what was the woman's name who was the
Denise Denovi?
Yes. No, it wasn't Denise Denovi. There was Kathleen.
Yeah.
Right. She was really great. And one of the things she did for me, and I think she did for you as well, she gave us each some memorabilia of each of our characters.
Yeah.
I have 4 of the original Jack heads. I also have Jack's blackboard in the scene where he writes everything on it. I have it down in my basement wrapped in bubble wrap.
Yeah.
And I have a couple of original cells.
Yeah. I think I had one original cell, and I had the dice. With these dice, with a little snake coming out. Yeah.
Don't say it too loud, the Disney Archives will be here. Back to the vault! Yeah. Your question has nothing to do with your bear.
My name is Paul. Yes, I'd like to ask you a question for both of you. What are the harsh realities of being an actor in showbiz and film, television, and stage? Is there a lot of downtime in between jobs and whatnot?
No.
We're working constantly. I have a story. This
is the face.
Everything. This is from the point of view of a member of my family. One of my daughters was about 4 or 5 years old, and she was having pizza with a friend and the friend's mom. And the friend's mom, they were talking about what their daddies did, and she turned to her own daughter and she said, you know what Daddy does, don't you? And her own daughter said, yes, Daddy makes wires in houses. And she said, that's right, Daddy's an electrician. And she turned to my daughter and she said, you know what your daddy does, don't you? And my daughter said, yeah, he looks for work. Does that answer your question, Paul?
Tough business, right? Agents getting cuts, yep, and nothing.
Thank you. It's a true story.
My name's Chris. I'd like to know, all right, so you each played characters that were pretty dichotomous, I think is the word I'm looking for. Whereas Oogie Boogie was, he was evil, but he was so jolly with his lines, and then Jack he was supposed to be the evil one, but he was so mournful about his, the somber songs. How do you achieve that dichotomy in your dialogue without, being able to project it because everything was animated for you?
Well, for me, as I said, they asked what my take was, and I said burglar, jolly, and the voice of the demon in The Exorcist. Not chopping. So I said, if I go too far in any direction, just tell me. I'll do a take on it this way. And so what we almost ended up doing most of the time was doing one to that side line and then do one to the other side, and then try to do one mixing it sort of in the middle. And then of course they chose what they used in the end. But that's what I kind of remember, the dichotomy of whatever it is.
Yeah, that was very much my experience too, is you went into the studio with Henry, and basically you tried it 10 different ways. You did it this way, you did it, and Henry would do, oh, no, try it this way. No, Sally. And you would do 4 or 5 different, 6 different readings, and of those they choose 2 or 3, and from that they would decide which one they wanted to do in terms of the way the scene was going, the flow of the scene, and then they'd animate it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Just one thought about rehearsal for you, Ken. When did you get to sit down with the music? Was it before you got to the studio? Was it there?
No, unless I'm blanking out on it and was so horrified, I just put it out of my mind now. But no, I don't read music that well, but I read well enough.
You and me both.
So, pardon?
You and me both.
Yeah. So I think I got there and they played it for me a few times, and then I just sort of bit by bit went through the whole song, and then there it was. I don't remember rehearsing, to tell you the truth. I probably did. Like I said, I've just forgotten now. But
it was only 20 years ago.
It was only 20 years ago.
Next question.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Good to see y'all.
What's happening?
Hey, buddy. We're old friends. We've known each other.
Call me the consecrator. But being a music nerd, I gotta ask, what did you think of the heavy metal version of the soundtrack?
There was a heavy metal version?
Revisited?
Yeah, it had Korn, Marilyn Manson, Flyleaf, Amy Lee from Evanescence.
Yeah.
Never heard of it. I honestly haven't. No.
Well, you know what? I thought it was a great idea that they did it, because there's a whole sort of, for lack of a better phrase, goth following for the show, for the film. And I think it allowed the people who follow it through that vein to access it even more. I mean, Marilyn Manson singing whatever it was that he sang, I forget, is certainly unique, And the people that record it live in the world of that feeling that the film has. I thought it was interesting. I didn't think, to be honest with you, I didn't think it was as good as the soundtrack recordings, because they were full of character as well as musicality, and a lot of the songs we recorded were done just from the point of musicality.
Mm-hmm. I personally loved it.
Me too, I didn't mean any of that.
He was just testing you. It was a test.
So I was just wondering if you guys found it more constricting to be doing voiceover, or kind of liberating since you weren't in front of the camera yourselves for that type of film.
But I find it more liberating because you don't have to look great, so there's that to start with. You can come in with 4 days growth and so on and so forth, and just do the work. I find it liberating, seriously, all jokes aside, in the sense that you can be wildly creative. Sometimes when we're rehearsing a show, not so much film maybe, but a show, you get to sort of have a period where you can try a lot of things and throw out a lot of things. But somehow when you're using voiceover, the whole process is that to a degree. You go for it. Go as far out as you can go, come back, do this, do that. Just a little quick story to that. I had a chance, I ran into Mercedes McCambridge, who was an amazing actress, but she did the voice work of the demon in the film The Exorcist. And she was like my hero, And I was at a mall in La Jolla, of all places, and there she was. So anyway, I went up to her and I told her how much I loved her work, so on and so forth. But she told me what they had her do when she was recording, or what she wanted to do, was to be gagged, and they tied her up and did all these things, and put her on the floor of the sound recording booth, and had her do all these sounds and things, and they recorded them. And that's how some of what you hear in the soundtrack of The Exorcist, that's how they arrived at it. And I thought to myself, in terms of freedom, where do you get to go get gagged and tied up and allowed to ride on the floor?
You'd be surprised.
I know freedom. Yeah. But freedom, do you know what I mean? I mean, to really be able to do whatever you need to do to get the sound there, you know.
I would agree very much with Ken that the limited amount of voiceover work I've done, particularly for animated voiceover, the freedom that you're allowed is really quite liberating and extraordinary. You know, you can basically go anywhere. And because of the process itself, if you go too far, they don't use it, doesn't matter. Or sometimes if you go too far, it's someplace they haven't thought of and that they like. So it's great. It's wonderfully liberating and great fun.
Thank you. Great question.
Hi, I'm Lindsay. Just to start off, you guys are like my biggest heroes. Just a quick question. What were your favorite scenes and or lines out of the movie?
Would you say that again?
What was your favorite scenes and or lines from the movie?
I like Oogie scenes. Actually, I think it's just such a wonderfully inspired character, Oogie scenes. That and the professor.
I was going to say the professor, because he somehow oddly sounded like Debbie Davis. Oh, nice. Hey. That's amazing. So I enjoyed him a lot.
Yeah. A wonderful actor, by the way, who played the professor named William Hickey, who was actually visually, except for the fact that he didn't have a head that you could actually open up and look at his brain, looked very much like the character in the movie. I don't know if they actually patterned it after Bill Hickey's look.
And probably, I mean, for those of you that don't recall, he was the great uncle in National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. That's who's the voice of the professor.
Yeah, he was also in a movie called Prince's Honor.
Oh, yeah. The big one.
Yeah. And it's the famous line that actually my wife and I are constantly doing. Ask for it, you got it, Toyota. You remember that character? This is the woman's father in the movie. Anyway, but a renowned acting teacher as well, Bill Hickey was.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. It better be good.
Hi, my name is Alana, and I have a question for Ken. Can you talk like Jack?
Say that one more time, sweetheart.
Can you talk like Jack?
Can I talk like Jack? No. Quite frankly and honestly, no.
You're trying to get Jack out of somebody up here, right? Sorry, sweetie. Nobody can.
You know what? I can talk like Oogie. How's that? I'll give you one Oogie line. How's that? Well, we're singing. Well, what have we here? Santa